Hello, viewers, and welcome to the latest GI Huddle. I'm Tim Poole, editor of Gambling Insider, and I'm with Barry Gibson, chairman of Entain. Barry, thanks very much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you.
Likewise, we've got plenty to talk about, especially with Entain. I would say with recent developments, but at Entain, there's always new developments. There's always something going on. To start off with, it'll be great to learn a little bit more about your role and career, and you've had a lot of experience in gaming. Um, can you talk us through a little bit about that experience and how it maybe compares to where you are now with Entain?
Sure. It's interesting when I look back now that I've actually been involved in the gambling industry for 53 years, but yet I still consider myself to be a shopkeeper. So I worked in a retail business called Littlewoods, but of course its base was Littlewoods football pools. Pool betting operation, been around since 1923. It celebrates 100 years this year, and it's still available. You can still do it online. It's just called the Pools today.
Hmm.
But I joined the retail arm of Littlewoods, and fast forward a number of years, I became the chief executive there, and was very heavily involved in the football pools business. And we launched a very early website. So I've kind of got long, deep history, but fundamentally, I'm about customers. I'm about customer service. I'm about kind of treating customers in the right kind of way. And through my career progression, working from companies like BAA, the airports company, where we developed the kind of world's best airport shopping malls. We were the first in the world to do it. And I'm very proud of the initiatives we took to look after the customers, a worldwide guarantee, value, absolutely kind of on the money as far as the customer was concerned. So I'm a customer guy. I listen, I understand the customers, and make sure that we offer great service. When I retired from executive life, which now, believe it or not, it's coming up for 20 odd years ago, I became a serial non-executive director, and I've been the chairman or a senior executive, a non-executive director, I should say, in companies as diverse as Summerfield, a big retail company, National Express, a big transport operator with global operations. But actually, I joined the board of William Hill when it floated back in 2002, and I became the deputy chairman there. I had 8 years there. I then went to Playtech. Everybody knows Playtech today, big software provider, big provider of infrastructure into the industry. From there, I joined bwin Party Gaming around about 2013 or so. And then there was a knock on the door from a young man called Kenny Alexander, who was running a little business called GVC, and he wanted to buy bwin Party Gaming. So we went through that process. And then I had a couple of years outside of the industry, but I came back to be chairman of SIS, the people who provide racecourse pitches and products, again, into the gambling industry globally. And from there, I was approached about 3 years ago to become the chairman of GVC, now Entain PLC.
Hmm. You say gambling has lasted sort of 53 years for you. You mentioned. Normally, I would ask how has the industry changed in that time, but across 53 years, obviously, it's changed an incredible amount.
Of course, there was no such thing as an internet.
Hmm.
Gambling wasn't regulated in most of the world. So we've seen massive change, but it actually has been mainly forced into the last 15 or 20 years since really the arrival of the internet created opportunities for innovative companies to serve customers globally, making sure that the product evolution went from purely kind of horse racing, which is where gambling started. There wasn't really much betting on football back in the late 60s, early 70s. Football pools was based on pool betting, but it wasn't gambling as we know it today.
Hmm.
So it has changed beyond all measure, but fundamentally it's been forced into the last 15 or so years. And I think particularly the advent of international regulation has made the industry much more attractive, and has created massive growth opportunities for companies such as ours that back in the day, companies were mainly organized on a national basis. A lot of it was high street. Today's omni-channel approach, so people can come and play with us, play with our products online or in store. We can have one-to-one conversations with people. We can do it by telephone. So it's just changed beyond all recognition. The products are different. It's much faster, and it's a global business.
Hmm. Obviously, you mentioned a couple of key things there. One is being regulation. We'll get into kind of the white paper a little bit later on and what that might mean for the industry. But obviously, you talk about growth and the appeal of the industry as a regulated industry today. Entain, I'm not sure quite what the best adjective is, but maybe an M&A machine might be an apt phrase. Plenty of acquisitions. In fact, one very recently with Angstrom Sports, which I think we'll discuss again later with the US angle. But a big one recently was STS in Poland, 750 million pound acquisition. Could you talk us through the strategy with that one? Because I think by what I would see as a classic, maybe Entain playbook, it ticks all the boxes in terms of it's a market leader in a particular European market. But maybe you can tell me more about the precise thinking behind that deal.
Yeah. Look, the definition of Europe changes from day to day, company to company, week by week. It's just an evolving situation. We are already Europe's favourite gambling company. So we're the biggest in Europe, and that can be online, in store, in the UK, in different countries, and so on. Central Eastern Europe is a big opportunity. And initially, following the kind of fall of the Berlin Wall, countries moved and changed at different paces. So we kind of identified that Central Europe had got a number of very successful businesses in it, mainly been built by founders, families who'd built a big market position. So we decided to approach the Central European markets, Eastern European markets, as a specific group. And whilst the countries are very different, and you've got to recognize local differences, what we've done is created a joint venture which enables us to bring together and tack on more companies to that approach and give us really leading positions. So Poland, the most recent one you talk about, we're number one in Poland by a country mile. Mm-hmm. It's a very attractive market. Various estimates show that Poland is going to become a wealthier country than the United Kingdom within the next 3 or 4 years. So you've got a young population, it's very dynamic. Gaming, gambling is quite important culturally to them. So building together a series of countries within that, if you like, is a mini set of what Entain has done for a long time. We've got world-leading technology. We've got brands which most companies would die to have. You think about bwin, you think about Labbooks, you think about, and so it goes on. And I often describe our businesses, it's like having a Rubik's Cube. We've got great technology, and you can turn around the faces and you can point to different products, different brands into different markets, but all driven from the central technology stack. And that's the kind of vision of where we're going to. And, we look at the world as just a series of opportunities. We're never going to go into unregulated markets. That's 20 years ago is what people were doing. We want to work in regulated markets, and Central Eastern Europe, very good regulation, mature regulation. We want to make sure that the black market operators don't really get the chance to have oxygen and thrive and cause harm to our industry and to the customers. So Central Europe's an important part. We're investing very heavily in Central Europe. We've got a fabulous management team, and we're going to kind of make sure that we keep that position of being Europe's favourite gambling company.
Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, is that strategy, I mean, it sounds like it is, but is that strategy going to continue in the sense that if there's opportunities for a particular brand leading in a particular market, again, within Central Europe, Entain will kind of snap that opportunity up? I'd be tempted to ask, will the next acquisition come? I was planning to joke that it might come by the end of this interview, but little the viewers may not know, while we were planning this, that the Angstrom Sports deal did happen. So it's almost not really a joke. Entain always keeps us on our toes with these M&A activity.
We have to make sure that the companies that we acquire are the right kind of businesses. So we're looking for great quality management. Often they come with products and systems which are as good as ours, but often they don't have the scale, the reach to be able to develop to the full potential. So those are the kind of characteristics that we look for. We don't always say we're going to force our brand through a channel of an acquisition into a market. So we tailor our approach to the individual opportunity, but it's got to be about regulation. It's got to be where markets growing. So young people, really, really interesting. Brazil ticks all those boxes, and that's what we'll do. And LATAM, it opens the gateway for us into LATAM, and LATAM is going to be an enormous market in the coming 5 to 10 years for regulated gambling.
Hmm. You mentioned the commitment to only regulated markets, and obviously Brazil with that regulation is going to become one of a regulated market. Um, how is that target of only having regulated market business going for you, and how realistic is it to have I guess 100% only regulated? Because you mentioned obviously in the past it was a slightly different business model across the board for all companies 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Look, I often describe the industry in its early days a bit like buccaneers wandering around the world looking for opportunities to kind of plunder and to pillage, and in little regard to local laws and regulation. And of course, the internet gave that opportunity. You could put a piece of kit on a rock somewhere in the middle of the ocean and broadcast your product wherever you wanted it to. And lots of companies made lots of money out of doing that. But national governments generally have recognized that gambling is going to happen. It can be good. It can be a force of good because it raises tax dollars. And every government in the world always wants to have more money to spend. It's what they do. And therefore, they've seen that regulation is the way to help protect their customers, protect their citizens, but also to raise lots of money for investment in healthcare, in education, and all those kind of things. And, we tend to forget, don't we, sometimes, that what gambling companies do is create products that people enjoy playing with. It gives them an opportunity to win some money. It raises enormous numbers of dollars, and it creates lots of jobs. What's not to like about it? So we think regulation is really important. When I first announced what we call Project Sunrise, we committed ourselves over a 3-year period to exit all unregulated markets unless they were on a clear path to regulation. We've now exited, getting on for 100 markets in the last 2.5 years. And we've given away, in inverted commas, we've given away $100 million of EBITDA, of profits, because we believe you can't be committed to doing the right thing if you say, oh, except we'll do it there because we make lots of money. And that's not what we were about. We're about making money, looking after people, looking after customers, working with regulators. So good regulation, I think, is really important. Good regulation applied equally and fairly is very important. And we all know that there's a very big black market. There always has been. And players who play on the black market aren't getting any of the protections that national governments are trying to create around the world. So we put our chin out front and said, we're going to exit these markets. We've done that. We're 100% in regulated or regulating markets. And we've been prepared to effectively invest by giving away profits, £100 million in that belief. We also want to work with regulators. So we work very interactively with regulators on making sure that the regulations well defined, well implemented, and to try and put some fences around customers to give them some protection. We'll talk, I'm sure, about our ARC program, our kind of responsible gambling controls to make sure that people don't get sucked in to the wrong behaviors. But good regulation, trust me, is really good. We like regulation, and we are proud to say we are the only multinational company that operates only in regulated markets. We're the only one.
That's a really good segue, I think, into what I teased earlier, that I think we should talk a little bit about the white paper now with the UK market and regulation. Obviously, one of the most regulated markets in the world, really mature online market. But as we'd all been waiting so long for this white paper, and it kept getting delayed, and it's here now. But again, it's important to note that it's a set of recommendations, and now obviously there's a consultation process, which I'm sure will involve the likes of yourselves and many others across the industry. I'll probably have a few follow-ups, but on the top level, what was your overall take on the white paper and its recommendations?
Delighted. Disappointed it took so long to actually see the light of day, and disappointed that it didn't go far enough in some cases. So, there's been a lot in the press, for example, about shirt advertising or sponsorship of football shirts. We voluntarily stopped sponsoring football shirts 3 years ago. We concluded that it was the wrong thing to do. We stopped advertising around football stadiums. We think it was the wrong thing to do. And I think that the proposals as they've come out now just have been too diluted by lobbying, by vested interests. If you think of the Premier League, which is where all the kind of money goes, not one of the 20 clubs in the Premier League need advertising from gambling companies. They only take it because it's available. The Premier League, if you look at the typical kind of income and expenditure and what's going on in the big clubs and so on, they just don't need it. Why did people lobby to keep it? I think that the government should have been tougher. Mm-hmm. And this voluntary ban by 2027, well, we'll wait and see. But we think it was an opportunity missed. I think that government should have said, betting on shirts, end of, stops. And there's not a football club in the Premier League would bat an eyelid at the impact on the viability. What other things I think about it? We're delighted that the industry is going to face a 1% levy. We voluntarily have been paying 1% of our UK profits into helping people who have problems with gambling. We're now delighted that there's going to be a situation where people will have to pay into that levy. So we think it's a really good move. Our only slight reservation about the 1% is we want to make sure it goes to a body, whoever the body is. It certainly shouldn't be the industry. It shouldn't be the NHS or some government department or whatever, that will make sure that money is well spent. You know, the amount of money that's going to be raised could be approaching £1 billion over a 5-year period. Now, we think that that money should be applied effectively. Whoever's responsible for having the money and distributing needs to have clear targets, clear measurements of outcomes, so it can demonstrate that it's creating the right environment for safer gambling. We're worried, we're concerned that at the moment that mechanism has not been clearly defined. And I've been speaking to leading politicians here in the UK and really saying to them, you know, we need real leadership from within government to say, this is a lot of money, and if it's spent wisely, it can make a big difference to people's lives. So let's create some kind of body, not a gambling related, not a gambling industry related one. We think that it will be a big opportunity to influence the issue around problem gambling and so on, which none of us want. Mm-hmm. We don't want one problem gambler. So I go through each of the kind of main initiatives coming out of it. You know, we think that if we can square the circle with the information commissions and the rules around data sharing and so on, that it does make a lot of sense to have controls that can be applied across the industry rather than across an individual operator. We do think that there's room for sharing of information to make sure that it's being done in the right kind of way. So overall, we're very, very, very happy about what's going on. And of course, it's not being altruistic ultimately. You know, we want to make sure that the best operators win the market share, because customers recognize that if you're playing with Entain, you're getting all the benefits of having someone looking after you. We don't want you to lose your shirt while gambling on us. You know, we want you to have a shirt so you can come gambling next week with us. And it's really true. It's about, you know, the best companies will survive and will do really well. And, you know, we've already taken some of those big steps that others have not yet taken. So we think that we're in a better place than most people are, because we'd already stopped doing certain things. We've already started paying the 1%. So we think overall it's come out very well. It's just a shame it takes quite as long, and we want the regulator to have enough resources to be able to get on and create the implementation framework to make this actual legislation work.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the data sharing. I guess slightly, I don't know if it's the right word, but grayer areas are perhaps the limits to online slot stakes. Sorry, and you know, the whole affordability piece. I mean, you mentioned obviously there's the potential for the opportunity for data sharing, but I don't know what Entain or your personal take is on maybe the online stake limits, potential ones, which I think are still not fully defined yet. Obviously going through a consultation process, and the whole issue of affordability and kind of getting involved at certain, you know, stages of losses per month and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Look, two slightly different questions you raised in there. For example, online slots and young people who come into gambling and through putting a bet on Liverpool playing Manchester United or whatever, and then get offered slots and it's seemed to be a bit of a problem. So we think that having maybe different age levels, because the fundamental problems of problem gambling is everybody potentially, but fundamentally it's young males that are a problem. So, we could see that there's a possibility of there being age tiering of different people. We can now fairly well administer age profiling of people who want to play with us. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good, generally speaking. We're against the notion of there being just a blanket limit. Let's take a number, £100, whatever it is.
Sure.
How do you define that? Is that how much you're putting into your wallet, or is that how much you're losing? Because people, of course, use the same money again and again and again. And how do you then differentiate between, let's say, a young student who's only got a limited amount of income and someone like yourself, a successful journalist earning lots of money, and if you want to spend more money, shouldn't you be allowed to do that? So I think what we've got to do is use technology to help us say, well, people who want to be able to deposit more, who want to be able to have higher stakes gambling, and bearing in mind we're primarily we're a recreational gambling company. We're not really into kind of big professional gambling tournaments and stuff. So I think technology can bring us solutions as long as the industry has the right kind of approach that says, actually, we're not against this. It's just, how do we do it? So if an individual joins, and let's say there's an initial limit established of what they can put into the wallet each week or each month, but then they can go through verification in terms of affordability and so on. So I don't think the industry does itself any favors by saying there shouldn't be limits. Mm-hmm. I think we should say, well, let's work out how we can use limits in a way that makes sense. So I'll be slightly controversial just to kind of make the point. If the limit was £1 million a week, the industry wouldn't have a problem because nobody does it. If it was £10 a week, the industry will be up in arms about it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's one particular number that's the right number, but it may well be that people in certain profiles should have limits put on them for a period of time, and they should be able to kind of move out of those levels by getting into the verification process to demonstrate they've got the wherewithal to do it. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't mind you being controversial. We welcome that on our podcast. Don't mind the compliment either. Thank you very much for a successful journalist. But it was not. I'm going to have to still ask, I guess, an objective or potentially tough question next, because seeing as we're on the topic of kind of regulation, that kind of thing, naturally, Entain, and it's fair to say, like most of the big bookmakers, most recently you had William Hill setting the unfortunate record of having the largest regulatory settlement with the Gambling Commission. There have been big. In some cases, fines. In some cases, they're not fines. They're settlements. We've got to be very clear to say exactly what they are for historic failings. How could companies such as yourself ensure that these, truly remain historic failings and that you're making the right progress to move forward and get things right?
In our company's case, until William Hill's recent fine, we had the dubious honour of having the highest ever settlement. Just add it very slightly and very quickly. When I was the chairman of HomeServe, it is a company involved in looking after people's homes, and it was fined for mis-selling, and it was fined something in the order of 39 million pounds for doing that, a regulatory settlement. You know what? It was probably the best thing that ever happened to that company because it made it re-engineer its processes and so on. This all happened back in 2011, and the company went on from that point in time to be the world leader, and it was sold for over £4 billion fairly recently as a result of learning some lessons, focusing on the customer, making sure that everything was about customer service, customer satisfaction. So that fine was quite a positive input to what went on. Here, we have been investing very heavily in people. So we've got an enormous team of people that are kind of working within the company on regulatory affairs, making sure we kind of do it in the right kind of way. And I think there has to be, from the head of these gambling organizations, a recognition that we do it properly. We do it in the right kind of way. And once you start to send that message into an organization, the entire organization becomes focused on doing it properly. Now, do I think we will forever avoid any regulatory breaches for whatever in the coming years? It's a very, very small chance that we would have a problem. Can you ever get to zero defects? There are always things that people can take a view, and regulators may slightly change their definition of something, and you end up breaching the rules. But fundamentally, we as a business have decided that we want to do it right, and therefore we encourage our team to tell us if we're not doing it right, and to make sure that nobody has financial inducements, for example, to deliver bottom line as opposed to delivering great customer service. So, can we ever guarantee it won't happen in the ongoing business? No, but we're doing everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen. Are there still going to be some historic things come out about what went on in the past in companies? Yes, there will be, because there's a lot of investigations going on around the industry. But going forward, if a business decides it wants to do it right, it then has to invest in the right people, through that into the right systems, and to make sure that fundamentally the organization is focused on the right output.
Definitely take the points you raised there around the kind of the processes that need to be changed and are being changed, and I think that's a good link to our next topic, which you mentioned earlier. It's the ARC, the ARC. Can you tell us more about that and Entain's approach to responsible gambling? Because it's obvious to the industry for the last few years that Entain has definitely made steps and publicized them very well, and if you could sort of walk us through the details of it.
Look, there are some fairly clear metrics that you can establish around how people behave and what they're doing. So working with some leading research organizations like Harvard, the medical school and so on, we've been able to identify what some of those markers of harm are. And if you think about the business world today of being online, we have all this data. So if you're playing, and excuse me if I just use it into kind of plain English, plain human speak. If you're playing online at 2:00 in the morning and you've been on for 4 hours and you've lost 75 quid, we know that. Of course we do. Now, we're not actually watching you individually, but we do know that's going on. So our systems can say, excuse us, Tim, but you've been online for 4 hours now and you've lost 75 quid. Do you think it's time for a break? And you'll probably respond to that in the right kind of way. So it's a very simple example that we can sit alongside you, as I describe it as a kind of guardian angel, to say, well, should we slow you down now? And ultimately we can say it's time for bed and switch you off. Now, the technology exists to do that. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, from a way which is saying to customers, this is something you should think about. We don't want to be a big brother. We don't want to stop. I think if you go back 10, 15 years or so, people would say, well, why would you want to turn a sale down? Why would you want to lose the profit margin on letting them carry on play? Well, we actually want you to enjoy it and come and play with us regularly. So ARC gives you the technological solution allied to the research that's going on. And we can see, when we make those kind of interventions, we can see how it changes what the customer does. So we think it's a very positive use of technology and of research data. And, we're kind of really pleased. And we've now rolled it out across all of our businesses. And I think that it's a responsible thing to do. Mm-hmm. So we're quite proud of what we've achieved in that. There's still some work to do. It'll continue to refine. We'll make it better and better and make it more seamless. But fundamentally, I think it's good to just be reminded, well, is it time? So a bit like if you're kind of on your bank and you're not doing anything for 90 seconds, it says, are you still there? Do you want to carry on, or do we log you off? That's a similar use of technology to bring some safety to the bank's customer. So we're doing a similar kind of thing, but much more sophisticated, by looking at your normal behavior, how you are, how much you're losing, what time of the day it is, and so on. So it's a great use of technology.
Mm-hmm. Within the same CSR field, but perhaps less reliant on technology, more on it charity work and research. You've got the Entain Foundation. Could you, something else that has achieved a lot, it's fair to say, in recent years and well publicized. Could you talk us through kind of the foundation's aims and what it's achieved as well?
We committed to put £100 million into the Entain Foundation over a 5-year period. We've established a world-class board of trustees. It's independent of us from an everyday sense, so it's being managed in the right kind of way. And a very good example, I think, is our pitching in approach. So we've said that we will not advertise at football matches and we will not sponsor shirts, etc. Now, there are levels of football that need help and support. So through the pitching in program, we can do exactly that. So we can make money available. See, it can be very modest. It can help a team acquire a set of football kit. It can help a team improve a ground. It can help make it safer for people in small grounds that don't have the same kind of standards of facilities that you've got in the bigger matches. It's a very community-based approach. We like to try and encourage communities to get involved in what we're doing. And we don't use any of our brand, as far as you won't find Coral or Ladbrokes at these places. People know it's Entain. People probably know that it's got some connection with, but it's not that. That's not what we're trying to do. We're genuinely trying to say we're taking some profits from our brands across the globe and we're putting it into this kind of foundation, which can help in local communities where we live and work. And it's been really quite successful. But we're not looking for any advertising benefit out of it, which kind of most sponsorships you are doing. So we specifically do not use any of our retail brands. By retail, I mean online, any of our customer brands. It's purely about Entain as a PLC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as you say, I take on board in terms of what you've achieved, and as you say, not looking for that advertising angle. We've covered a lot of topics so far, and thanks very much for all your answers. Very, very insightful. But we haven't even really mentioned North America yet, which obviously in today's market, I think that's a sign of the global operations of Entain, because we could have done this whole hour on perhaps North America. I'm going to leave it as the final topic here. I think perhaps. Before we discuss BetMGM specifically, it might be worth maybe a note on Angstrom Sports, because obviously, as we mentioned earlier, that's the most recent acquisition to date for Entain. If you could maybe sort of walk us through that deal.
Yeah, I mean, Angstrom have some very, very clever engineers working in there, compiling data, creating sports odds products, and we recognise that we have got great reach in UK, European markets, Australian markets. In North America, we don't really have access to that kind of technology and that thinking. The guys at Angstrom do have that, and we've been working with them for some time. And eventually we decided that it would make much more sense if we could accelerate their growth and development. So that's why we've made the acquisition. It's not yet completed, but it will provide product opportunities into the US market and to LATAM that we currently either have to buy in third party or we just don't have access to. So Angstrom isn't a retail brand. It's very much a product that we can use to develop the product we sell through our retail brands. So it's a good acquisition. It's costing us quite a lot of money, but we're very, very sure that it'll be a good addition to the family.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And next up, I think we can talk about MGM, which it's a very interesting topic. I'm sure, for example, if we're to talk about the future of BetMGM, a publicly traded company, there's specific things you can say and probably can't go too much into detail. But BetMGM, I want to ask you about the growth path that you see for it, because obviously you have MGM Resorts and Entain, it's a JV, but also when it comes to the US sports betting market, FanDuel and DraftKings have a clear lead at the moment. BetMGM is in a lot of markets, I think officially placed third or fourth, probably third in a lot of states. But of course, it is worth mentioning in online casino, BetMGM is a leader. Just wanted your kind of take on the growth path of that brand.
Okay, you mentioned two of the leaders in the market. Of course, both of them came from a fantasy background. and very cleverly, I have to take my hat off to them, very cleverly built a fabulous database of people who liked the idea of betting on sports. And they've been able to convert that into real money gambling very well. As an alternative, if you look at what we've done, is we've gone from a standing start, i.e. no business, to being number 3, and as you say, in certain parts of the market, higher than that. So we're delighted with the way things have gone. And today, and we're talking today, we're just announcing results for the first half year for BetMGM, and I'm delighted that it's making continuing progress. We see ourselves moving into cash positive in terms of profitability for the second half of the year. In fact, for the second quarter, we moved into profitability. So it's a really big milestone for us to get to. We've been investing very heavily in people, in technology, and very much in advertising, so customer recruitment and so on. But we are going to become profitable this year. So that's a major milestone to go behind, to get beyond. And we see ourselves being a number 1 or number 2 player in the US within the next couple of years or so. On the question of the joint venture, it gets a lot of speculation. We get on very well. We get on very well with our friends at MGM Resorts. Any joint venture has a limited life. I can't think of a joint venture that lasts more than 5-10 years. It's the nature of what it does, and it's because at a point in time a joint venture makes sense, and then at another point in time it becomes sensible. So we have no firm plans, but when I'm asked by the city, are you planning to float? Are you planning to sell? Are you planning to buy? My answer is probably to all of the above. But there's no kind of current timetable that we're working towards doing that. But we've got a great team of people. We've got over 2,000 people working in BetMGM now in the US. I was over there just a few weeks ago chatting with the management team about their frustrations and their ideas and their ambitions. It's a fabulous business. And I know from my 50 odd years of business experience that fabulous businesses normally do pretty well. And BetMGM, I think when we were approached by both MGM and then by DraftKings wanting to buy us a couple of years, I took it as a great compliment. I think they saw in Entain a combination of things that the market hadn't kind of really got their idea of the value of the business, but these guys knew us very well. And I was kind of quite flattered that they approached us. The fact that we decided at the time that they didn't have pockets deep enough to make it worth our shareholders giving up tomorrow's prizes for today's price. But the real world is that the joint venture is doing really, really well. We have no plans to buy, sell, or float. But as you said earlier, by the end of this interview, you never know.
No, that's very clear. I mean, the profitability angle really can't be underplayed because DraftKings, but not just them. A lot of firms, that cost, that high player cost that you mentioned. It's very tough for firms to make a profit at the moment. You mentioned earlier Kenny Alexander, and you just mentioned potentially being 1 or 2. I'd like to link those two things, and I'll explain how, and throw one follow-up question, perhaps the last one on this topic. When I interviewed Kenny Alexander when it was just GVC, not Entain, a few years ago, he predicted that the share price would reach £20 within, I think it was 3 years. So it was a bold prediction. Everyone sitting around the table sort of said, we wish he didn't say that, but we printed it and it actually happened. So that was it did reach that goal within that timeline. I don't know if you want to, maybe you want to play it safe, but I don't know if you want to make any predictions. Do you think you can become number 1 in certain states or number 1, number 2 in US within a certain time frame? I might be putting you on the spot a little bit, but I don't know. It's up to you, really.
We have ambitious plans. Mm-hmm. We don't want to leave ourselves open to hostage to fortune by saying a week on Friday we're going to be number 1 in Wyoming. Yeah. What we will do is we will invest carefully. We will make sure we have the best people, the best systems. We're very confident that we'll be number 1 or number 2 in the market over the period of the next 2 or 3 years. But we'll wait and see where the opportunities are. I do know, though, that working with the regulators, working properly with customers, having really great products, all driven by fabulous people and underpinned by world-leading technology, It's a pretty safe bet. And by the way, I'm not a gambling man, although I've been working in this industry for a long, long time, apart from having the odd bet on the Grand National or Cheltenham Gold Cup or whatever, and most importantly, on my beloved Liverpool. And I always bet that we're going to win because I'm a typical punter that kind of bets with his heart, but I'm not a gambling man. We'll build a great business. We'll become number one or number two. Not quite sure of the time frame that'll happen.
Sure, sure. Well, I'm delighted to potentially close the interview off by saying I'm also a Liverpool fan, and I've worn a Liverpool shirt on the GI Huddle before, so hopefully that's that's good news for you. But Barry, thanks very much. Best of luck to Liverpool this season, but best of luck to Entain and everything you're looking to achieve. Thanks for walking us through a lot of topics there in a great level of detail, and it's been a pleasure having you on. Thanks very much for your time and your answers.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks.